We live in a society that constantly tells us that our worth comes from being kind, loyal, and hardworking. From childhood, we're programmed to believe that if we just show up, put in the hours, and treat everyone with respect, we'll be rewarded accordingly. Has this ever happened to you? You've been the reliable one, the team player, the person everyone knows they can count on. Yet somehow, when opportunities arise, you're overlooked. When recognition is handed out, your name seems to slip through the cracks. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly command respect and influence, while others remain invisible despite working twice as hard? What if everything you've been taught about creating value in this world was fundamentally wrong? There's a reason for this that few are willing to acknowledge. The uncomfortable truth is that goodness is common, hard work is everywhere, loyalty is expected. These qualities, while virtuous, are ultimately cheap in the marketplace of human relations because they're abundantly available. They're the bare minimum, not the distinguishing factor that makes someone truly indispensable. What Machiavelli understood better than most is that the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards necessity. To be truly valued, you must position yourself where others depend on you. This requires a fundamental shift in thinking about how you present yourself to the world. It's not about being seen. It's about being needed. It's about creating a situation where your absence would be felt as a painful void rather than a minor inconvenience. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Look at history's most powerful individuals. They weren't chosen for their pleasantness, but because systems would collapse without them. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you approach your career, relationships, and personal growth. The cold reality that no one wants to admit is that if you can be replaced, you will be. If people can live without you, they will. If losing you doesn't hurt them, they will never truly respect you. This isn't about manipulation or deceit. It's about understanding human nature at its core. People protect what they need. They cherish what they can't easily replace. They respect what creates consequences when it's gone. The question you need to ask yourself isn't, how can I be better, but rather, how can I become necessary? In the coming minutes, we'll explore the ruthless but transformative art of becoming dangerously valuable, a person whose presence makes everything move and whose absence makes everything collapse. We'll examine the psychology behind true influence, the strategies that create dependency, and the subtle ways you can position yourself not just as an option, but as the only viable choice in any room you enter. The journey ahead will challenge everything you've been taught about creating value in this world. If you found value in these Machiavellian insights on becoming irreplaceable, hit that subscribe button now. I'm constantly sharing powerful strategies that most people will never discover about. Influence, value, and strategic positioning. The transformation begins with a fundamental shift in your goals. Most people spend their lives seeking validation, desperately trying to be liked, acknowledged, and approved of. They give without calculation, help without boundaries, and sacrifice without return. They chase the fleeting high of being appreciated rather than the enduring power of being essential. This mindset keeps them trapped in a cycle of invisibility despite their constant efforts. To be seen, your journey must take a different path. From this moment forward, your objective isn't to be validated. It's to become dangerously valuable. This hidden truth changes everything. When you become someone who cannot be ignored or replaced, whose presence drives progress, and whose absence creates disruption, the entire dynamic of how people treat you transforms. Think about the impact this shift creates. When you're merely liked, you're an option. When you're needed, you're a priority. The decisions you make now should all serve this single purpose, increasing your necessity in every environment you enter. This isn't about manipulation. It's about strategic positioning in a world that only values what it cannot easily replace. The essence of true power isn't found in visibility but in necessity. Being seen isn't the same as being valued. Many people chase the spotlight, believing that recognition equals influence, but they're pursuing the shadow rather than the substance. Real power operates more quietly. It's felt in your absence rather than announced by your presence. When you're needed rather than merely liked, you fundamentally transform your position in any relationship, organization, or social structure. This revelation changes how you approach every interaction. Instead of asking, "How can I impress these people?" start asking, "How can I become indispensable to them?" The first question leads to temporary approval. The second creates lasting influence. Behind the scenes of every powerful position is this same principle, not the ability to demand attention, but the ability to create dependency. The privilege of presence emerges once this transformation is complete. When you truly become necessary, people's behavior toward you changes dramatically, often without them even realizing why. They begin to fear losing you. They protect their connection with you. They give more than they take from the relationship. The power dynamic shifts without a single word being spoken about it. Notice how the world's most influential figures are treated. People accommodate their schedules, value their opinions, and prioritize their needs, not because these individuals demanded such treatment, but because they positioned themselves where their contribution became essential. Their journey to this position wasn't accidental. It was the result of deliberate choices to increase their necessity rather than their likability. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining the fundamental misconception most people have about value itself. The programming we've received since childhood has created a dangerous blind spot in how we approach our worth in the world. This blind spot keeps talented, hard-working individuals trapped in positions far below their potential. If you're beginning to recognize this pattern in your own life, write in the comments, "I choose necessity over approval." The revelation that transforms everything starts with recognizing the deception we've all been fed. Since childhood, society has programmed us with a fundamentally flawed understanding of value. Think about the messages you received growing up. Be polite, follow the rules, work hard, be nice to everyone. These aren't inherently bad teachings, but they create a dangerous blind spot in how we navigate the world. This programming is so deeply embedded in our mindset that we rarely question it, even as we watch others who break these rules rise effortlessly above the compliant masses. This social conditioning is like invisible chains, keeping talented individuals trapped in a perpetual cycle of giving more and receiving less. Behind the scenes, those who understand true power dynamics operate on entirely different principles. They recognize that compliance and pleasantness might make you liked, but they will never make you necessary. The hidden truth is that this programming serves those at the top by creating an endless supply of replaceable workers, partners, and associates who believe their goodness will eventually be rewarded. Your journey toward becoming dangerously valuable requires distinguishing between two concepts that most people confuse: appreciation and value. This distinction is crucial for your transformation. Appreciation is what you get when you smile, help out, work overtime, or go the extra mile. It feels good momentarily, a pat on the back, a thank you, perhaps even public recognition. But appreciation is fleeting, easily forgotten, and creates no lasting leverage in your relationships or career. True value, on the other hand, is measured by what happens in your absence, not your presence. It's not about the warm feelings you generate, but the cold reality of what breaks down when you're not there. The revelation that changes everything is that most people spend their entire lives chasing appreciation while unknowingly diminishing their actual value by making themselves too available, too helpful, too replaceable. This misconception stems from a fundamental principle of human psychology that governs all value assessments. People don't value what's freely available. This isn't cynicism, it's simply how the human mind works. We admire what we must earn and fear losing what we cannot afford to be without. Look at anything you truly value in your life. It likely required effort to obtain, is difficult to replace, or both. This principle operates in every domain, from relationships to business to social standing. When you give your time, knowledge, or skills too freely, you inadvertently signal that these things aren't valuable. By being constantly available, you communicate that you have nothing better to do. By helping without conditions, you indicate that your assistance is worth nothing. Each of these decisions, while seeming kind or generous in the moment, gradually erodes your perceived value in the eyes of others. The journey toward becoming indispensable begins with a conscious reversal of this pattern. Instead of increasing your availability, you must strategically limit it. Instead of giving everything freely, you must create systems where your contributions are recognized as rare and essential. This shift requires courage because it means going against your social programming and risking temporary disapproval for lasting power. This is just the beginning of your transformation. Subscribe now to continue mastering the hidden principles of power and influence that separate the extraordinary from the merely good. Join our community of strategic thinkers. What makes this particularly challenging is that we've been conditioned to see such strategic thinking as somehow immoral or manipulative. Yet those who master the psychology of value creation often find themselves in positions where they can help others more effectively than ever before, precisely because they've established the leverage necessary to create real change. If this perspective is shifting how you see your own value in the world, write in the comments, "I now see the value game clearly." Machiavelli, perhaps one of history's most misunderstood strategic thinkers, crystallized this insight centuries ago. It is better to be needed than to be loved. This revelation isn't born from cynicism, but from clear-eyed observation of human nature. Love, admiration, and appreciation, while emotionally satisfying, are ultimately fragile bonds. They fluctuate with mood, can be transferred to others, and often dissolve when tested by adversity or competing interests. Necessity, on the other hand, creates connections that people are afraid to break. Consider the transformation that occurs when someone depends on your unique abilities, insights, or resources. Their attachment to you isn't based on fleeting emotions, but on practical reality. Behind the scenes of every lasting power structure, you'll find this principle at work. Those who control necessary resources, whether tangible like money or intangible like specialized knowledge, wield influence that transcends personal feeling. This mindset shift represents one of the most profound revelations you can integrate into your life strategy. What's particularly dangerous about conventional wisdom is how it encourages behaviors that actively undermine your position. The journey toward becoming indispensable requires confronting an uncomfortable truth. Unconstrained goodness without the foundation of leverage doesn't lead to respect, it leads to weakness. Loyalty without boundaries becomes exploitation. Hard work without control becomes a form of willing slavery. These aren't pessimistic perspectives, but clear-eyed assessments of how human systems naturally operate. The truly powerful don't simply demonstrate virtue, they create dependency. They understand that generosity without strategy doesn't build influence, it diminishes it. This hidden truth explains why so many good people find themselves perpetually overlooked, undervalued, and taken for granted. Their goodness isn't anchored in a framework that generates respect. Instead, it signals an unlimited willingness to give without expectation of return, a position that human nature inevitably exploits rather than rewards. Perhaps the most damaging pattern that keeps talented individuals trapped in positions of weakness is what I call the paradox of overgiving. When you consistently give everything to people who give nothing back, you're not building value. You're teaching a dangerous lesson that they can take from you without consequence. This imbalance occurs because many believe that doing more automatically makes them matter more, when it often achieves precisely the opposite effect. Think of relationships or work situations where you've poured in disproportionate effort, only to find yourself less valued over time, not more. This isn't an accident or bad luck. It's the predictable outcome of a flawed approach to creating value. The psychological impact of easy acquisition devalues what is received. When your time, attention, and capabilities are given without conditions, they're perceived as abundant rather than precious, common rather than rare. The transformation begins when you recognize that value isn't created through unlimited giving, but through strategic positioning. This doesn't mean becoming cold or calculating in your relationships. Rather, it means bringing consciousness to the dynamics of exchange and ensuring that what you offer is recognized for its true worth. It means setting boundaries that communicate self-respect and creating situations where your contributions are clearly visible rather than taken for granted. The mindset shift required here is substantial. It means moving from "how can I help more" to "how can I help in ways that create recognition of my unique value?" From "how can I be more available" to "how can I make my availability meaningful?" From "how can I work harder" to "how can I work smarter in ways that can't be easily replicated by others?" If these insights are creating a fundamental shift in how you view your interactions with the world, write in the comments, "I've been giving away my power." Now we must confront one of the most profound revelations on this journey, the fundamental limitation of mere usefulness. Being useful, having skills, being productive, delivering results seems like it should be enough to secure your position. But this perspective misses a crucial reality. Usefulness alone is temporary, replaceable, and easily copied. In a world driven by self-interest and efficiency, those who can be substituted will inevitably be overlooked when more convenient options appear. Think about it from a pure mindset perspective. The marketplace is filled with useful people, individuals who can complete tasks, solve basic problems, and fulfill ordinary functions. This abundance creates a commodity situation where useful people become interchangeable parts in a larger system. The transformation happens when you realize that true value emerges only when others begin to fear life without your specific contribution, when your absence creates a void that no one else can easily fill. This requires a complete paradigm shift in how you approach your interactions. Instead of asking, "How can I be more useful?" start asking, "How can I become irreplaceable?" The first question leads to more work, but not necessarily more value. The second leads to strategic positioning that fundamentally changes how others perceive your worth. This revelation has been hiding in plain sight throughout your entire journey, obscured by conventional wisdom that emphasizes pleasant compliance over strategic necessity. The path forward requires a value shift that may initially feel uncomfortable. You must stop offering free kindness and endless sacrifice without strategic purpose. This doesn't mean becoming unkind. It means becoming intentional. Every action you take should serve the dual purpose of delivering value while simultaneously increasing your perceived importance, raising the cost of losing you, and transforming your presence from a nice option into an absolute necessity. Behind the scenes of every powerful position is this same foundation, actions taken with clear awareness of how they position you in the value hierarchy. When you help someone, consider how that help makes you more essential rather than more expendable. When you solve problems, ensure your solutions highlight your unique approach rather than making you obsolete. When you contribute, do so in ways that become associated with your specific presence rather than becoming generic assets anyone could provide. The deepest secret of influence is what I call the dependency law. Real power doesn't come from chasing approval, but from creating strategic dependency. When your existence becomes inextricably tied to others' progress, comfort, status, or survival, you transform from irrelevant to irreplaceable in their perception. This isn't manipulation. It's understanding the fundamental psychology that drives human valuation and decision-making. Consider the relationships in your life where you hold the most influence. Chances are these aren't the relationships where you're most liked, but the ones where you're most needed, where your specific contribution creates outcomes others value but cannot easily replicate. The same principle applies in professional environments. The most respected team members aren't necessarily the friendliest, but the ones whose absence would create the most disruption. This perspective reveals why so many talented individuals remain undervalued despite their capabilities. They focus on delivering results without strategically positioning those results as uniquely tied to their presence. They solve problems without ensuring others understand the specialized insight that made the solution possible. They create value without creating the crucial perception that this value is dependent on their continued involvement. If you're beginning to see how this principle has been operating in your life all along, write in the comments. The dependency law changes everything. Understanding dependency correctly is crucial for your transformation. Many mistake this principle for manipulation or coercion, but genuine strategic positioning isn't about forcing others to need you. It's about becoming so integral to systems, outcomes, and successes that your absence would naturally create collapse. Think of it as architectural design rather than domination. The wise leader doesn't demand importance. They engineer it by becoming the foundation upon which stability itself rests. This mindset shift reveals the blueprint behind every truly powerful position. Those with lasting influence don't announce their necessity. They demonstrate it through positioning that makes their value self-evident. Behind the scenes, they're constantly asking, how can I structure my contributions so they become load-bearing elements rather than decorative features? They focus on creating situations where their fingerprints are on essential processes, where key decisions naturally flow through their perspective, and where their unique insights become embedded in the very fabric of success. The revelation here is that this approach creates a form of influence far more durable than what comes from mere appreciation. Appreciation, that warm feeling of gratitude and recognition, evaporates the moment someone more convenient appears. It's susceptible to changing moods, shifting priorities, and the basic human tendency toward recency bias. We quickly forget who helped us yesterday when someone new offers help today. Dependency, by contrast, creates a completely different psychological bond, one built on obligation, subtle fear, and a form of loyalty that cannot be easily broken. This isn't because people feel coerced, but because the cost of replacement becomes prohibitively high. When your specific contribution creates unique value that others rely upon, the prospect of losing access to that contribution generates a form of protective behavior that no amount of general goodwill can match. The journey toward this position requires cultivating what I call rare value. identifying and sharpening a skill, resource, or mindset that others need but cannot easily replicate or substitute. This isn't about becoming marginally better at common abilities. It's about developing capacities that exist in a category of their own, where comparison becomes impossible because there simply are no ready alternatives. Look at the most powerful people in any field. Their position doesn't stem from being loved for their goodness, though they may indeed be good people. Their influence comes from the simple fact that their removal would create immediate chaos. They've positioned themselves at crucial intersections where resources, decisions, or capabilities flow through them in ways that would be costly or impossible to reroute. This positioning isn't accidental. It's the result of deliberate choices to develop and deploy their value in ways that maximize dependency. The transformation begins when you examine your own skills, knowledge, and capabilities through this lens. What do you currently offer that others genuinely cannot get elsewhere? If the answer is very little, then you've identified precisely why your value hasn't been properly recognized. The breakthrough comes when you start deliberately cultivating abilities and positioning yourself in ways that make your specific contribution uniquely valuable rather than generally useful. This principle explains why technical specialists often command more respect than general managers, why people with rare insights get invited to more important tables than those with common perspectives, and why those who can solve problems no one else can solve receive treatment no one else receives. The equation is simple but powerful. Uniqueness plus necessity equals irreplaceability. If this perspective is making you rethink how you position your own skills and contributions, write in the comments, "I'm cultivating my rare value." The true benefits of strategic dependency extend far beyond mere recognition. When you successfully create these structures of necessity, a remarkable transformation occurs in how others relate to you. People will actively seek you out even if they don't particularly like you personally. They'll find themselves agreeing with your perspective despite internal disagreement. They'll protect your position and defend your value despite private envy or resentment. This isn't because you've manipulated them, but because they've recognized, consciously or unconsciously, that their own stability, progress, or success has become intertwined with your existence. This reveals the hidden architecture behind many power dynamics that might otherwise seem mysterious. Why does that difficult but brilliant developer get accommodations no one else receives? Why does that demanding but connected executive never face consequences for behavior others wouldn't get away with? The answer lies in dependency. Their contribution has been positioned as so essential that the organization adapts around them rather than expecting them to adapt to the organization. When you fully embrace the principle of indispensability, you create the highest form of security possible in a world where most people remain fundamentally disposable. This doesn't come from being perfect or universally liked. It comes from providing something critical that would be difficult or impossible to replace. The revelation here is that indispensability isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters in ways that cannot be easily reproduced without your specific involvement. Think of the journey toward this position as creating a unique lock-and-key situation. You develop capabilities, connections, or insights that perfectly address specific high-value problems, then position yourself as the unique solution rather than a generic resource. This strategic alignment creates a form of professional gravity that naturally pulls opportunities and resources toward you while simultaneously raising barriers to your replacement. Now let me take you deeper into perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of becoming dangerously valuable, invisible influence. The most powerful form of control doesn't announce itself or draw attention to its mechanisms. True mastery comes from operating beneath conscious awareness, shaping perceptions, decisions, and environments without triggering resistance or even recognition that influence is being exerted. Think about the difference between commanded compliance and invisible influence. When someone demands action, they create immediate psychological resistance. But when they shape the environment so that certain actions become the natural, logical choice, they achieve the same outcome without the friction. This subtle distinction represents the difference between crude power and sophisticated influence, between being obeyed reluctantly and being followed unconsciously. The most dangerous form of value operates in this invisible realm. Rather than asserting authority directly, you create contexts where your preferred outcomes seem like natural conclusions. You don't tell people what to think. You control the information that shapes how they think. You don't demand recognition. You position yourself where recognition becomes inevitable. You don't force dependency. You architect situations where dependency emerges as the most rational arrangement. This approach requires patience, observation, and strategic restraint, qualities that run counter to our cultural emphasis on immediate visibility and credit-taking. The transformation happens when you realize that announcing your influence often diminishes it, while letting others discover your value naturally amplifies it. The most powerful people rarely tell you they're powerful. Their power is simply felt through the consequences of their presence or absence. If you recognize the subtle forces of influence that have been operating around you all along, write in the comments, "I see the invisible currents now." The art of truly dangerous value lies not in commanding others, but in crafting environments where your desired outcomes emerge organically. Those with real influence understand a fundamental truth. The architecture of environments shapes behavior more powerfully than direct instruction ever could. By controlling the context rather than forcing the outcome, you create situations where others naturally move in your preferred direction without feeling pushed, manipulated, or controlled. This environmental design operates like invisible architecture, structures of influence that guide movement while remaining unseen. Think about how physical spaces shape your behavior without you noticing. A well-designed store layout naturally leads you to high-margin products. A thoughtfully arranged office facilitates certain types of collaboration. The same principle applies to information environments, social dynamics, and decision frameworks. The masters of influence don't fight against natural human tendencies. They harness and direct them through careful environmental design. Ruthlessly. Revelation here transforms how you approach influence entirely. Instead of trying to convince people directly, which triggers natural psychological resistance, you shape the conditions that lead them to convince themselves. You don't insist your idea is best. You create circumstances where your idea becomes the obvious solution to a problem everyone recognizes. This approach requires more patience and strategic thinking than direct commands, but it creates momentum that continues working in your absence rather than collapsing the moment you stop pushing. The power of subtle control represents one of the most profound insights on the journey toward dangerous value. Subtle control is vastly superior to obvious power because it encounters dramatically less resistance. People instinctively fight against direct commands. It's a psychological reaction tied to our need for autonomy. But they eagerly embrace ideas they believe they discovered independently, even if those discoveries were carefully orchestrated behind the scenes. The mindset shift here is from "how can I make them do what I want" to "how can I create conditions where what I want becomes what they want." This isn't manipulation in the negative sense. It's alignment. It's understanding human psychology deeply enough to create win-win scenarios where your objectives become intertwined with others' desires. The most influential people rarely have to force compliance because they've mastered the art of making their preferred outcomes feel like independent choices. At the core of this approach lies strategic information control. In any environment, those who control the flow of critical information shape how others perceive reality and therefore how they respond to it. By positioning yourself as the trusted source of crucial insights, updates, or context, you gain the ability to frame situations, highlight certain aspects while downplaying others, and establish the parameters within which decisions are made. This doesn't require withholding or distorting information. Rather, it means becoming the natural conduit through which important information flows. When you're the person others rely on to make sense of complex situations, to provide context for confusing developments, or to connect disparate pieces of information into meaningful patterns, you gain influence that operates at a fundamental level, shaping the very reality others are responding to. The revelation that changes everything is recognizing that in most environments, people aren't responding to objective reality, but to their perception of reality. And those perceptions can be thoughtfully shaped. By becoming the sense maker, the context provider, the pattern recognizer that others rely on, you create a form of influence far more powerful than explicit authority could ever achieve. If you're starting to recognize these environmental forces operating in your own life and relationships, write in the comments, "I see the invisible architecture now." The most sophisticated level of influence comes through psychological embedding, a process where you integrate yourself so deeply into the mental frameworks of others that they naturally think of you during key decisions, even when you're not physically present. This creates a form of persistent influence that continues working in your absence, shaping choices and perspectives without requiring your direct intervention. The transformation happens when your voice becomes part of someone else's internal dialogue. This embedding process happens through consistent association with specific values, insights, or perspectives. When you reliably provide a unique viewpoint that proves valuable over time, people begin to unconsciously ask themselves, "What would you think about this?" before making important decisions. Your perspective becomes internalized as part of their decision-making process, a mental checkpoint they pass through naturally without recognizing the profound influence it represents. The revelation here shifts your focus from being present for every decision to ensuring your perspective remains present even when you're not. Rather than trying to control each individual choice, you work to shape the mental models and frameworks that others use to evaluate all choices. This creates a multiplier effect where your influence extends far beyond your direct interactions, operating continuously in the background of others' thought processes. Now let me introduce you to one of the most counterintuitive principles in becoming dangerously valuable: the scarcity principle. In a world obsessed with accessibility and availability, the hidden truth is that perceived abundance dramatically diminishes value, while strategic scarcity elevates it. By making your time, attention, and approval scarce resources that others must earn rather than expect, you fundamentally transform how they're perceived and valued. This principle operates on a deep psychological level. Humans naturally assign greater value to what is difficult to obtain, limited in availability, or requires effort to access. Think about the journey of any luxury brand. Their value isn't primarily in superior materials or craftsmanship, but in carefully managed scarcity. The same principle applies to your personal and professional presence. When you're constantly available, endlessly helpful, and automatically supportive, you inadvertently signal that your resources have minimal value. The mindset shift required here challenges everything we're typically taught about being accommodating. Instead of maximizing your accessibility, you must strategically limit it. Instead of responding to every request, you must be selective. Instead of giving approval freely, you must make it meaningful through thoughtful distribution. This isn't about becoming difficult or unpleasant. It's about respecting the true value of what you offer enough to ensure others respect it too. Let me take you deeper into the concept of systemic integration, perhaps the most powerful yet least understood avenue to becoming irreplaceable. Most people position themselves as independent elements that interact with systems rather than becoming integral parts of those systems. The transformation occurs when you integrate yourself so thoroughly into the infrastructure others rely on that removing you would require rebuilding the system itself. Think of the difference between a consultant who provides advice and an advisor whose perspective has become embedded in the decision-making process. The first remains external, valuable perhaps, but ultimately replaceable. The second has become part of the system itself, creating a form of organizational dependency that transcends individual relationships or specific contributions. When you're systematically integrated, your removal isn't just inconvenient, it's disruptive to the entire operation. This integration happens when you position your contributions at critical junctures where resources, decisions, or information naturally flow. Instead of being an optional addition to existing processes, you become a necessary component of those processes. Your fingerprints appear on essential frameworks, your perspective shapes core methodologies, and your unique approach becomes standardized into how things operate. If you're recognizing how these principles of influence have been operating around you all along, write in the comments, "I'm becoming part of the system." The journey toward becoming dangerously valuable requires mastering the principle of delayed reciprocity. This approach transforms how exchange happens in your relationships. Most people fall into one of two traps. They either give without expectation of return and feel resentful when nothing comes back, or they demand value up front and create resistance. The revelation comes in creating situations where you give first but establish clear expectations of return, forming a powerful middle path that generates both goodwill and obligation. This principle creates a foundation for relationships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. By initiating the exchange cycle with genuine value, you demonstrate good faith and create psychological debt. But by simultaneously establishing the expectation of reciprocity, you avoid the trap of being taken for granted. The transformation happens when others begin to feel internal pressure to balance the scales, not because you're demanding it, but because the psychological weight of unreciprocated value creates discomfort they want to resolve. Think of this as planting seeds of obligation that grow naturally over time. The initial gift establishes your value and generates appreciation, while the clear expectation of return ensures that appreciation transforms into action rather than merely pleasant feelings. This approach requires patience and confidence, qualities that separate strategic value creators from those who give impulsively or demand immediately. Now let me introduce you to the power of psychological anchoring, one of the most subtle yet influential elements in becoming irreplaceable. Your mind naturally creates associations between elements that appear together repeatedly. By deliberately managing when and how you appear in others' experiences, you can anchor yourself to specific emotions, outcomes, and states that create powerful unconscious biases in your favor. The revelation here changes how you time your presence and contributions. When you consistently appear during moments of success, relief, or positive breakthrough, people subconsciously begin associating your presence with achievement and solution. This isn't manipulation, it's strategic positioning. You're genuinely contributing value, but doing so at moments when that value creates the strongest positive association in others' memory and perception. Behind the scenes of every strong, relationship or position of influence, you'll find this principle at work. Those who understand it ensure they're visible during victories, available during breakthroughs, and present when good news arrives, while strategically limiting their association with failures, frustrations, and negative outcomes. Over time, this careful positioning creates a halo effect where your mere presence begins triggering positive expectations independent of your specific contribution. Let me take you deeper into perhaps the most profound mechanism for creating irreplaceability, the identity bridge. This concept represents the pinnacle of strategic value creation, forming connections between your identity and others' sense of self, so that they begin defining themselves partly through their relationship with you. When this bridge forms, separation becomes not just professionally inconvenient, but psychologically painful. This phenomenon explains why certain relationships persist despite logical reasons to end them. When someone's self-concept becomes intertwined with their connection to you, when who they are includes their relationship with you, severing that connection threatens their identity, not just their circumstances. This creates a form of loyalty and dependence that transcends rational calculation because it operates at the level of self-definition. The identity bridge forms when you become part of someone's story about themselves, a character in the narrative they use to make sense of who they are. When their achievements include your guidance, when their growth involves your influence, when their future plans assume your continued presence, you've created a form of value that cannot be easily replaced, because doing so would require them to rewrite their own story. If you're recognizing relationships where this principle has been operating all along, write in the comments, "I see the identity bridges in my life." Let me reveal one of the most powerful positions you can establish in any environment: the trust monopoly. In a world filled with uncertainty, inconsistency, and disappointment, becoming the singular element that others can truly rely on creates a form of value that borders on irreplaceable. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being reliable when reliability is rare. When you consistently deliver what you promise while others regularly fail, you transform from one option among many into the default choice during times of stress or importance. The revelation here changes how you approach commitment entirely. Most people casually promise and occasionally deliver, creating a landscape of general unreliability. By deliberately promising less but delivering more, by establishing a track record where your word becomes an almost physical certainty, you create a stark contrast that elevates your value far beyond your specific skills or resources. This reliability becomes a form of psychological safety that others become reluctant to surrender once they've experienced it. Think about the transformation that occurs when someone knows with absolute certainty that you will deliver exactly what you say, when you say, without exception. They begin structuring their plans, expectations, and decisions around this certainty. Your reliability becomes integrated into their risk calculations and planning horizons. And most importantly, they begin protecting their access to this rare form of predictability in an otherwise chaotic environment. Now let me share a paradoxical insight that might initially seem contradictory. While reliability creates value, complete predictability can diminish it. The most sophisticated position combines consistent capability with strategic unpredictability in your specific actions. When people know you can deliver but cannot precisely predict how you'll approach a situation, you create a combination that generates both deep respect for your abilities and healthy caution about challenging or dismissing you. This balance operates on a profound psychological level. Complete predictability eventually leads to being taken for granted. When others can anticipate your every move, they begin to feel they've figured you out. and no longer need to engage with your full complexity. Strategic unpredictability keeps them attentive, engaged, and slightly off balance in a way that maintains their respect and interest. The masters of influence demonstrate rock-solid reliability in outcomes while maintaining creative flexibility in approaches. Think of this as the difference between being dependable and being boring. The first creates value, the second erodes it. By consistently delivering results while varying your methods, maintaining some mystery about your specific techniques, or occasionally surprising others with unexpected approaches, you create a form of engagement that keeps your value fresh rather than allowing it to become commoditized through complete familiarity. Let me take you deeper into what might be the most nuanced aspect of becoming dangerously valuable: the visibility balance. Most people err on one of two extremes. They're either constantly present, diluting their impact through excessive availability, or they're so absent they become forgotten. The transformation happens when you master the balance between visibility and mystery, being present enough to be valued, but scarce enough to be desired, creating a perpetual state of appreciative anticipation among those who need you. This delicate equilibrium requires strategic decisions about when to appear and when to withdraw, when to contribute and when to observe, when to lead and when to follow. It means becoming highly visible during critical moments where your specific value creates maximum impact, then stepping back during routine operations where your presence isn't essential. This creates a rhythm of engagement and withdrawal that trains others to value your appearances rather than expecting your constant presence. If you're starting to recognize the power of these strategic positions in creating lasting influence, write in the comments, "I'm mastering the balance." The deepest form of influence comes through what I call foundation building, positioning yourself as the essential base upon which others construct their success, security, or status. This creates a form of value that's nearly impossible to remove, because doing so would threaten not just a single outcome, but entire structures of achievement. The revelation transforms how you approach your contributions entirely. Instead of being helpful in visible, easily recognized ways, you focus on becoming the invisible but essential support that makes everything else possible. Think about the difference between someone who contributes to a project and someone who creates the framework that makes the project possible in the first place. The first can be thanked and replaced. The second becomes integrated into the very definition of success. When others build their achievements on the foundation you provide, whether that's your insight, your systems, your connections, or your unique approach, they develop a form of dependence that transcends ordinary appreciation. They protect and value you instinctively because threatening your position would threaten their own stability. This shift in positioning requires thinking beyond immediate recognition to long-term integration. You're no longer seeking credit for specific contributions, but embedding yourself so thoroughly in the architecture of success that your presence becomes assumed rather than questioned. The masters of influence don't just help others achieve, they become the platform upon which achievement itself stands, creating a form of necessity that operates at a structural rather than transactional level. Now let me introduce you to one of the most profound sources of influence available: controlling hope. Beyond physical resources, beyond information, beyond even present circumstances lies the territory of future possibility, and those who become the source of others' belief in improvement and progress gain extraordinary influence over their present actions and decisions. When you control the narrative of what's possible, you shape behavior today through the gravitational pull of tomorrow. This form of influence operates at a deeper psychological level than most. People naturally orient themselves toward possibility and improvement, When you position yourself as the pathway to that better future, when your guidance, connection, or approval becomes linked to their vision of progress, you create a form of alignment that requires no enforcement. They move toward you, not because you push them, but because you represent the direction they already want to go. The transformation here comes from shifting your focus from solving current problems to articulating future potential. While others remain trapped in the immediate, you create value by connecting present actions to future outcomes, helping people bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. This doesn't require special powers of prediction. It requires a genuine understanding of aspirations and the ability to create credible pathways toward their fulfillment. Let me take you deeper into the architecture of aspiration itself, the subtle art of shaping the very visions and goals others pursue. Most people assume aspirations are fixed, that people simply want what they want independently of outside influence. The hidden truth is that aspirations themselves can be architected, refined, and directed. By positioning yourself as the gateway to carefully shaped aspirations, you create voluntary alignment rather than resistance. This represents perhaps the most sophisticated form of influence possible because it operates upstream of conscious decision-making. When you help define what success looks like, what achievement means, or what possibilities exist, you shape choices before they're even considered. This isn't about manipulating people into wanting things against their interests. It's about artfully connecting their genuine desires to pathways where your value becomes central to their fulfillment. If you're beginning to see how profoundly these principles could transform your position in any relationship or organization, write in the comments, "I'm becoming the foundation." The most profound influence doesn't come through forcing compliance, but through creating voluntary alignment. Unlike coercion, which inevitably creates resistance, controlling hope generates willing cooperation that feels entirely self-directed. This represents a complete transformation in how power operates. Rather than pushing against natural human tendencies, you harness them, creating situations where people move enthusiastically toward what they want, while your influence subtly guides their path. The revelation here changes everything about how you approach influence. When people believe they're making entirely independent choices, following their own desires and acting on their own initiative, they invest themselves fully. They bring their creativity, their passion, their persistence without reservation. Yet behind the scenes, the architecture of those choices, the framing of those possibilities, and the pathways to fulfillment have been thoughtfully shaped to align with your objectives. This mindset shift requires abandoning the ego-driven desire to be visibly in control. The masters of influence don't need others to know they're being influenced. They need only for the desired outcomes to manifest. This approach creates a form of power that operates with minimal friction because it works with human nature rather than against it. People naturally move toward possibility, toward improvement, toward hope. And when you become associated with these forces, you gain their momentum without having to generate it yourself. Now let me share what might initially seem counterintuitive, but represents perhaps the ultimate power move: strategic absence. While conventional wisdom emphasizes constant presence and visibility, the hidden truth is that your greatest influence often comes not from being perpetually available, but from disappearing at your peak. This transforms presence into legend, scarcity into demand, and respect into a form of reverence that constant exposure could never achieve. Think about the difference between something you can access any time versus something rare and precious that appears only at significant moments. The first becomes background noise, easily taken for granted. The second becomes an event, anticipated and valued precisely because of its scarcity. The same principle applies to your presence and contribution. By strategically withdrawing at moments of maximum impact and value, you create a void that highlights your importance through its emptiness. This brings us to the paradox of absence, the strange truth that leaving when others depend on you most actually ensures your influence continues beyond your physical presence. When you disappear at the height of your value, you create a psychological vacuum that your absence fills with speculation, appreciation, and often idealization of your contribution. Strategic disappearance doesn't diminish your influence. It amplifies it by creating a void that everyone recognizes but cannot easily fill. Think of this as the difference between being a resource and becoming a legend. Resources are used and forgotten. Legends grow in stature even in absence. By carefully timing your withdrawal, not out of petulance or manipulation, but as a deliberate strategy to maximize impact, you create a situation where others begin attributing even greater capability and importance to your contribution than might exist in reality. The journey toward becoming dangerously valuable culminates in the integration of these principles into daily life. Knowledge without action is ultimately powerless. These aren't abstract concepts to be admired, but practical tools to be deployed with purpose and precision. The transformation happens when you begin consciously applying these insights across your relationships, career, and personal development, shifting from passive acceptance of your assigned value to strategic creation of your actual worth. This integration process turns ordinary existence into strategic authority, making you not just temporarily useful but genuinely irreplaceable. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to position yourself more effectively. Each contribution becomes a chance to create dependency rather than merely appreciation. Each absence becomes a strategic choice rather than a random occurrence. If these principles are creating a fundamental shift in how you view your own value in the world, write in the comments, "I'm becoming strategically irreplaceable." Now you understand the hidden architecture of value that most will never grasp. The difference between being appreciated and being needed, between being useful and being irreplaceable. This perspective transforms not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. You're no longer at the mercy of external validation, but positioned at the center of strategic necessity. As you move forward with these insights, I want you to remember that this journey isn't about manipulation, it's about alignment. Creating value so profound that others naturally protect their connection to you, becoming so essential that your absence creates a void no one else can fill. This is the Machiavellian art of becoming dangerously valuable. If this message resonated with you, if you felt that moment of recognition where suddenly patterns in your life made sense, write, "I choose necessity" in the comments. I read them personally, and I'm curious to see who truly understood the deeper message here. Leave a like on this video if you found yourself nodding along, recognizing these invisible forces that have been shaping your relationships and opportunities all along. Your engagement helps these ideas reach others who need this perspective but haven't discovered it yet. And if you're ready to continue this journey of strategic influence, I've created a video that reveals how to apply these principles specifically to career advancement and professional positioning. It's waiting for you right here. Click and let's continue exploring how the world really works, beyond the comforting myths most people never question.